Good morning, everyone. Today we're turning our ethical lens, literally, to news photography. You already know the four major ethical imperatives of journalism: seek truth and report it, minimize harm, act independently, and be accountable and transparent. Now we're going to apply those same principles to the world of photojournalism, where truth, harm, independence, and accountability often collide in a single image. Let's begin by asking what the purpose of news photography really is. Photography and journalism serve several overlapping purposes: to inform, to entertain, and to persuade. When photographs inform, they communicate knowledge. They supplement the text of a story with visual evidence and help audiences grasp what happened. For instance, consider the image of the container ship Dolly resting against the wreckage of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge on March 27, 2024. That single photograph informs us of a real event and answers part of the classic journalistic questions: who, what, where, and when. But it also does more. It shows scale, destruction, and impact, things that words alone might fail to convey. At other times, photographs entertain. That doesn't mean they're trivial. It means they grab attention and engage interest. When we see Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce kissing Taylor Swift after the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, the image tells a story that mixes celebrity, sports, and emotion. It may not be hard news, but it engages audiences and humanizes public figures. Entertainment value isn't inherently unethical, but it can distract from what's important or blur the line between legitimate news and gossip. Photographs also persuade. They encourage certain feelings and interpretations, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Take the image of then presidential candidate Donald Trump surrounded by Secret Service agents after an assassination attempt at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania in July 2024. This photo doesn't simply inform, it conveys chaos, fear, and urgency. It might even suggest a narrative of protection or martyrdom. Journalists should understand the emotions that photograph encourages, and whether in doing so it crosses the line from objective reporting into persuasion. Every image is capable of shaping perception, and ethical awareness helps us recognize that influence. Here we reach a deeper distinction: news versus truth. News gives us facts: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Truth gives us meaning, the factors like context that influence how we interpret those facts. For example, an image showing the devastation of the Palisades fire in Los Angeles might simply document a fire as news, but as truth, it might convey a sense of loss, fragility, or the consequences of climate change. Photography sits between fact and interpretation. Every decision, the framing, lighting, timing, and even what is left out, shapes the meaning an audience will draw from it. There's a persistent myth that a photo never lies, but that's not quite true. A camera may capture light from the real world, but every photo is still an interpretation. Composition, angle, moment, and cropping all introduce perspective. As one scholar writes, although there is a sense in which the camera does indeed capture reality, not just interpret it, photographs are as much an interpretation of the world as paintings and drawings are. When we discuss photo ethics, we're not only asking whether a photo is real, but how it represents reality, and whether that representation is fair and responsible. To ensure that photojournalism acts with the same ethical integrity as print journalism, we will consider the various stages of the process and the ethical questions that need to be considered each step of the way. We will continue to draw on the four major principles of ethical journalism, which apply just as strongly to photojournalism. The first major ethical decision for a photojournalist concerns when to take the picture. This is where the principles of seek truth and minimize harm often pull in opposite directions. If the only way to take a picture is to interfere with the event that the photojournalist is covering, that is a breach of the journalist's obligation to document reality, not influence it. If getting the picture means putting others in danger, or even putting the safety of the photographer himself at risk, that action would be against the imperative to minimize harm. A news photographer initially assesses whether the photo could cause the subject harm and the possible news benefit of the photo if taken. Are they causing unnecessary distress to the subjects or to bystanders? And most importantly, does the image genuinely add value to the story? The tension here lies between harm and benefit. A powerful image might illuminate injustice, but at what cost to those being photographed? The difficulty with this first step is that photojournalists often need to make it in a split second, and there simply isn't enough time for a complicated decision-making process. In these situations, a photographer will almost always take the photo because there will always be time later to decide whether or not to actually publish the photo. If the photographer takes a photo that he or she regrets later because of the harm it might cause, they can always decide not to publish. The second stage of the ethical decision-making process comes after the photo is taken and considers whether it should be published. Editors and photographers alike must ask whether the photo has genuine news value. Is it an isolated incident or part of a broader story? Does the public have a need or merely a curiosity to know? Will publishing cause harm to a subject's privacy, dignity, or reputation? Could it traumatize readers? The essential question becomes, is the harm justified by the public value of the image? This is where the principle of minimizing harm must be weighed carefully against the duty to seek truth. The picture in these slides was taken during the COVID-19 pandemic and displays a hospital patient being treated for the virus. On one hand, a hospital setting is generally one where there is an expectation of privacy, especially for private citizens who may be fighting for their lives and in a vulnerable state. On the other hand, photographs like this helped make public the severity of the pandemic and the condition of thousands of fellow citizens who contracted COVID-19. This photo does have considerable news value, but a photographer should only take the picture with the patient's consent. The line between public value and voyeurism can be exceedingly thin. Consider the famous 1982 image, Behind Closed Doors. The photographer, Donna Ferrato, had been embedded with a married couple to document their swinger lifestyle. In the middle of one night there, she heard a commotion in another room of the house. "I heard Lisa screaming and things breaking," she recalled. "As soon as I entered the bathroom, Garth raised his hand to slap his wife in the face." That's when she started snapping photographs, including the one pictured. In light of the complex ethical content of the photo, let's apply the test we have developed in this lecture. Should the photo have been taken in the first place? This incident reveals firsthand how little time there often is to answer that question and how much it generally is more of an instinctual rather than rational process. With that being said, there is some question about whether the safety of the woman in the photograph should have been prioritized over taking the photo. Should the photographer have attempted to intervene? In the photographer's justification afterward, she said that part of the reason she started taking pictures was in the hope that the abuser would become self-conscious of his actions once he was aware that they were being documented, and that realization would stop his actions. Unfortunately, that did not end up being the case. Another safety consideration might be whether the photographer put herself in harm's way to take the picture. The second stage of the test asks whether the photo should be published. This is the balancing act between seek truth and minimize harm. What is the news or public value of this photograph? On its face, it documents a situation that might seem to demand privacy. The couple are private citizens, in the privacy of their own home, and did not ask for the photograph to be taken. The moment itself was raw and shocking, and the photographer's presence is deeply invasive. Yet the photo brought to light an issue that society had largely buried, and up to that point mostly refused to talk about: the hidden realities of domestic abuse. As Time magazine put it, at the time, domestic abuse was largely considered a private, even taboo subject, rarely depicted in mainstream news media or visual journalism. Ferrato's work changed that. Her argument for publishing the picture was that it documented a serious problem that the public needed to face and address for the benefit of many people. On the other side, there will be harm caused by publishing this photo. The names of both the man and woman pictured will undoubtedly be exposed, and they will have to live with their identities tied to it for the rest of their lives. The photo itself may cause trauma to some viewers who are survivors of similar forms of abuse. It may also simplify the issue of domestic abuse, which often takes place in complicated familial and emotional contexts in the mind of the public. At the end of the day, the photographer decided that the benefit to the public outweighed the harm. Publishing it, she believed, revealed something of deep public significance about abuse, power, or injustice, and was not intended to merely exploit human suffering for shock value. Allowing me to take these pictures has helped explode the myths around domestic violence and show that if any woman is being beaten in her home, that's an affront to all of us. In this case, the harm of publication was justified by the photograph's social impact. When you think about the role of photography in journalism, remember that every image tells a story, but every image also makes a choice. Ethical journalism isn't just about being accurate, it's about being humane. Every time a journalist raises a camera, they must ask, am I revealing truth or am I causing harm? Am I serving the public or exploiting the private? Those are the ethical questions that distinguish journalism from sensationalism.